action. Hello, everyone. We are here again at the Tech Talk at LEOCODE, and I invite here smart people from the IT industry who deal with developers and difficult IT challenges and digitalization. And I try to bring the most smart and the most challenging people so they can share some ideas, inspirations, and also tell their own stories, how to make the high-performing teams and how to deal with different struggles we do have in the IT due to pandemic and many other different events. So today I brought to you Tristan. He will tell about himself in a minute. He's a friend of my friend Basili. They used to work together at Opera, and we decided to have this small interview. So Tristan, super nice to meet you and have you in my podcast, and I'll be happy if you can introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, hi, Damian. I'm Tristan Ekfelt Turpin. I'm an engineering manager for Oda, a Norwegian online grocery store, a little bit more than just grocery, that recently acquired the title of first unicorn in Norway. Oda is going international and is going to launch in Finland and Germany later on this year and the next. And I manage two teams over there, one that revolves around the commercial space, and the other more around the search and recommendation and discovery space.
Okay.
And before that, I worked as engineering manager for Vipps, mobile payment company. And before that, on those various roles as tech lead, project manager, front-end engineer in companies such as Opera Software and Yahoo.
So you moved from France. I know you're French. That's the question. How does it feel moving from France? I'm not sure this is the north or south side of France, but to the cold Norway and to life with Vikings.
Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. So I moved originally. It was a bit by chance or like by desire, really, because I wanted to discover a bit like the north. But it was supposed to be like a very short period, like about 3-4 months for an internship. But then I got hired and just started to really discover and enjoy the country. It's extremely different from France, much flatter hierarchy, much more, I want to say, maybe respect for the employees in a way. It's basically a more comfortable place to work.
That's interesting. I guess the cultural influence, cultural difference also has a huge influence on the work and also in the IT teams. So how do you see that, the cultural difference between working with French IT teams and Norwegian IT teams?
Well, one thing that, for example, shocked me when I arrived is like how direct were employees with their managers. In France, this would not be accepted, right? It would be badly seen. It could be like grounds for like, I don't know, like more action. Over there, since like the structure is much more flat, there is a much more direct level of communication. And I think it actually really helps like resolving conflicts and basically making it like a better working place. This being said, it's important to realize that I left France about close to 15 years ago. Probably a lot of things have changed there, or at least I hope.
Okay. You mentioned at the beginning that Oda became a unicorn and it's growing fast. So what's the biggest challenge for you while scaling IT teams? As you have two teams, what's the biggest challenge?
So I guess like there is a lot to pick when it comes to challenges in scaling an IT team. But if I have to pick one, I would say it would be like about how do you balance like the original culture and flexibilities that made the company great and working well originally. So how do you balance that with the fact that as you grow, as you become like a larger company, you absolutely need to introduce processes and tooling. So you will have like maybe some more agile software development processes and tooling around that. How you deal with inter-team dependencies, with side requests, which at one point has to stop, right? When you become a large company, otherwise you don't do your main work. How you deal with priorities and so on. So I would say the biggest challenge is like this balance: retain what made the company great, the culture and the flexibility, and adapt for being a bigger company.
Mm-hmm. Have you been impacted by pandemic and the way you had to change from the office to the, first of all, fully remote work? Right now, I guess a little bit hybrid. Did you feel any impact on that style?
So obviously, Oda had like a huge impact during the pandemic, since we are delivering groceries immediately. We reach our maximum capacity as people required to be delivered at home. I was not there during this exact time. I was in my previous company.
Mm-hmm.
But Oda adapted pretty quickly to remote work. And I would say like their biggest challenge there was to bring new people to the company and onboard remotely. And that is, I think, new for a lot of people, except companies that were fully remote from the start. For everyone else, it's a difficult process. So I myself have onboarded remotely and only saw my colleagues in person about 8 months after. So that we were highly
interesting. I know, because even developers, when I gather together right now with them and we have some retreats and we see each other after a few months, it's belonging, it's connecting. We like each other. I mean, we are not cavemen sitting in the basement. Everyone at some point would love to discuss, sit together, drink a beer or coffee. That's what makes the team a bit stronger. And again, we are small networks, and this connectivity is very strong when there's interaction, not only online. And there was also the Zoom fatigue issue, that you can spend the whole day on Zoom and then you are very exhausted. And after Zoom fatigue, you have to do some stuff anyway. So yeah, that's challenging.
Absolutely. And I think there is also like some side effects that you don't notice immediately, but some initiative starts to think slowly. Like, for example, like things like technical talks or like presentations, because it's a bit more difficult for everyone. You need to join remotely. When you're a presenter, you don't have like the same kind of feedback as when you have like an actual live audience with you. You even have, in many cases, like people are shutting down their camera, for example, and it's quite hard, right?
True. How about hiring? I guess there is still the issue with shortage of talents and multiple companies trying to solve it a different way. I know, I see even in Poland, there are more and more companies outside of Poland who never try to outsource. I mean, not outsource, but never try to hire directly from Poland. For them, it was a bit too difficult. And currently they see asynchronous work and remote work works. So why don't we go and hunt talents outside of our country, outside of US, and so on and so on. And then we can somehow trigger the best people in the world. We just need to have the right culture and then right leadership and management. How does it work in your case, the shortage of talents?
So both like Oda and my previous company was already like hunting outside of Norway. So it's basically like just simply not enough people in Norway. So we have to hunt outside. And I guess you have like several strategies. So one is to do like everything internally, which will require a huge workload on your engineering managers, product managers, UX managers, and so on. You can have like your own talent acquisition teams. That's what we have in Noda. You can work with external recruiters, which is what many companies are doing. That's what we were doing in my previous company. And those external recruiters will then connect with developers from various countries, and then sort of do a pre-selection for us. Yeah.
So if I may ask, I mean, you have to answer, how many of your team members are located in Norway and how many outside, like more or less percentage? Just curious, how did you manage that?
Okay, so currently, my team in
more or less.
in Oda, my teams in Oda are mostly from people who were already in Norway, or they moved, like, let's say, like a year or 2 years ago in similar circumstances, being brought by another company. In my previous with my previous employer, I would say maybe a third of the team was coming from other place. Yeah, something like that.
One more question. What is your worst and the best experience in managing tech teams? If you can share two separate stories. We always share some lessons, and then people can compare to what they have, if this is like a common problem or maybe there's some individual case, but you learn by mistakes or success stories.
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure if there was like really a mistake, or it was or rather like a conjunction of events happening at the same time. But I guess, like, so starting with the worst will be when I was managing close to 20 people, which is a lot for one engineering manager, I think. And at the same time, we were continuing to scale the company, so there was a lot of time dedicated on hiring, so reviewing like profiles, interviewing, doing the interview, and so on, and pair people together. Doing all this while attending the usual tasks with a deep domain dive and technical dive. Working in finance, there was a lot of compliance-related concerns. And doing this, and on top of that, resolving a difficult team conflict. And I think like all of this was really a lot, and it lasted for a while. So that was quite a stressful time. And like this kind of a moment where sometimes you want to give up, and then you power through, but it tends to last a bit long. So if I had like to and of course all those problems like resolved with time, but if I had to take like a lesson from that, it's a classic one where the recommendation that for an engineering manager, you don't get more than 8-10 people to manage, because it gives you a bit more headspace to deal with the rest that's coming your way. On hiring, there was not much that could be done, because hiring becomes like easier when you start building a network in the company, and you can share the load there. So yeah. So for the best.
Okay.
Sorry.
That answers my question. Maybe the last one, as I just have it in my mind. The world is changing. That's what I see. There's this huge movement right now: NFTs, blockchain, metaverses, and even ODA grew based on the, it's partially cultural shift, partially the economic shift due to the pandemic. So it might be quite challenging for IT, as you probably see that. Plus, there are more and more frameworks, languages, and so on and so on. So there is a huge, in my opinion, speed of tech evolution or revolution. We see more and more blockchain and so on. And I see that the role of IT manager or project manager becomes quite difficult. I mean, you have to adapt. I don't know, 10 years ago, that's my feeling, it was a bit easier. You had to manage people, everything was a bit slower, so it was easier. First of all, it was easier to hire people and maintain them. Now the retention rate is higher. And what in your opinion is the the most important skill for the IT manager of the 21st century or for upcoming 10 years? If I were, I mean, I'm kind of IT manager, but let's say if I were a new IT manager, which skills do you think is the most important for me to learn, to adapt to?
I think one important skill is, it's a bit like the same as being an engineer. You need to understand that your work is continuously evolving and you will need to continuously learn. So you need to read a few books related to the trade. You need to go to a few conferences. And I think at least for me, it's really important is exchange with other engineering managers on like what went well, what went wrong with different projects in their career, share a lot, basically. That's what matters. When it comes to dealing with those new technologies and approach, it's always difficult because you need to keep an open ear, but you also cannot possibly follow each and every of those topics. So you have to have a selective
Balance.
basically.
Yeah, because you will drown in chaos and you will start too many things at once and not finishing one, not being expert. So some people get excited, they start, but sometimes it doesn't work. It's like I'm a big fan of no code and low code, and I see that there's another wave of those tools and they're growing. And trying addressing the shortage of developers for simple stuffs. But still, there are some issues with security, data, and so on and so on. So it's easy to create a drag and drop software, but there's more like that, compliance, and so on and so on. So yeah, everything has its own challenge.
And of course, hiring experts in those areas is like one way to deal to deal with it. But again, it's also difficult.
All right. Thank you very much, Tristan. It was a really pleasure to have you here, and I really enjoyed the conversation about the differences in cultures and the challenges in IT. And I hope that we will see soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you, David.